Hey guys, and welcome back to a very belated Talking with Shadows, the conversation everyone has, and we've eventually gotten to. Here with your hosts Vic Waitley
and Marcus D. And the first thing that we need to do is welcome our newest patron, Sean. Thank you so much, Sean.
And the second thing is we should probably apologize for this coming up late.
Yeah, sorry guys. Me and Vic have been kind of really busy lately, and a lot of recent events had actually taken us away from home, so it was kind of hard for us to record actually.
Yeah, my father had some health issues and I had to leave town for about a week.
Yeah, all of last week I was down in Nashville competing in a comedy competition. Didn't do well. I did well, but I didn't win. But I was very happy with how I did while I was down there. But now we're back in the studio today, guys, recording today's episode, and I'm very eager to finally talk more paranormal.
And thirdly, I suspect you guys might have noticed a slight tweak to our intro.
Yeah, we forgot in our last episode to give a shout out to one of our good friends, the Libertarian Guitarist. He made a fantastic rendition of the Star Spangled Banner on his guitar, and I thought it'd be really cool to kind of play it for you guys around the 4th of July. Didn't get to last episode, but we got to this episode, so I really hope that you guys enjoyed that. If you guys enjoyed his music, go over and support him on YouTube. We're going to put a link to his YouTube channel in the comments below. Quick shout out before we get to today's episode. We want to talk about our poll that we have put up on our Patreon. So if you guys didn't check out our last episode, we have decided that we are going to have our fans vote on what the name of our fan base is going to be.
And just so you know, guys, right now it's a dead heat.
It is a dead heat right now. So if you guys want to vote on what our vote for one of our top contenders for the names of our fan base, they are Truth Seekers, Candlelight Drifters, Shades, Shadowlings, and the Whisperers.
And who's tied right now?
Right now it is a dead tie between Candlelight Drifters and Shades. So if you guys want to vote on this poll, you don't have to be a patron on our Patreon to actually vote in this poll. All you actually have to do is make a Patreon account and then go over to our Patreon and vote in this poll. And we're going to put a link to this poll in the comments below.
But at the same time, if you get there and see a persuasive argument, plug.
You know, it's like, oh, look, they have a ton of other content that they have just for their patrons only, such as 15 to 20 minutes extra for every podcast, as well as exclusive paranormal videos for their patrons.
Plug.
But if you guys can't become a patron, anyway, you guys can that you guys want to support us, we are always super appreciative. You can give a like to this. Share is probably one of the best things you guys can do. Leaving a comment also really makes our day and makes us super eager to make more paranormal content for you guys.
So, comments from the last episode.
Yes, finally get to the comments from our last episode. So if you guys didn't catch our last episode Solo plays the government. We talked about Gary McKinnon, who back in 2001 hacked the United States government, hacked NASA, the Army, and all that. Found out it was actually pretty easy. And he snooped around for almost 2 years, looking at classified documents, finding all sorts of various kind of weird things when he was looking in there, such as files under NASA or under the Navy, entitled non-terrestrial officers. As well as a whole file system in NASA where they have photoshopped versus non-photoshopped photos of UFOs. So the very first comment that we're gonna do comes from Death Knight. Death Knight says, "Awesome! One of my names was picked. Topic of the video was very interesting. I've heard of him before, but didn't really look into him. My thoughts are that the UK was using him, and honestly, I believe they are more powerful than we believe they are. They probably wanted to figure out the extension of the US capabilities.
That's pretty similar to kind of what I was thinking too.
I agree. I think that most governments know more than what they let on any particular topic, and they probably wanted to keep what they knew he knew close to heart. So yeah, they probably wouldn't want Gary McKinnon back into the hands of the U.S. government.
Because yeah, I really can't think of why they would fight this hard to keep him if they still didn't consider him an asset.
Yeah, and the United Kingdom is a major ally of the United States. If they said no, we're not going to send him over, what's the U.S. going to do? I mean, really? I mean, so they had a real strong play there, I think. Kay Bennett says, I have a few comments. One, I'm terrified that these docs are barely protected by minor passwords. He's probably changing his reasons just because he is trying to save his behind. The UK probably is using him as an agent, hopefully cybersecurity. It almost seems like Asperger's in the UK is like a mental state you can't prosecute like insanity, which is weird. 5, given the U.S. Navy had a massive projects with spy planes over countries, and given that NASA has admitted they have black ops missions, I say the Navy non-terrestrial officers may control spy space satellites.
I can see that.
I can see that too. I think I agree with a lot with what you're saying there, Kay Bennett. I'm just kind of in agreement with on you.
And there's a lot of weird on-the-books cases involving Asperger's and the British government that are just very odd cases.
Mm-hmm. Guy Prieto says, hey guys, the Lobstrosities are from the Dark Tower series, mainly the second book, The Drawing of the Three. But yeah, soon to become a patron and glad one of my names got picked. We're very happy too. Again, guys, no other podcast or YouTube channel loves their fans more than us.
Super hearts, guys.
Super, super hearts. So today's episode is dedicated to all of our fans out there that you guys are listening. So in honor of that, today for you guys, I am drinking Bud Light Seltzer Mango.
And I'm drinking Bud Light Seltzer Strawberry. And if you're wondering why Bud Light Seltzer, because I had a party and someone left a bunch of them here.
And I think Ellie drank most of the good alcohol.
Yeah, Ellie has drank most. We need to find a way to hide the alcohol from Ellie. Because Ellie will just drink all of it.
And we're irresponsible about buying the alcohol, going out and buying alcohol before these. So this is probably our punishment what we're left with. All right, so this is to you guys, our fans.
Cheers.
Cheers to you guys.
Clink.
Oh, that is fabulous mango soda water.
You do not look like you care for it.
Oh, it's like drinking out of dare. Oh.
I don't mind mine, but I like seltzers. Like I'm that guy who actually kind of likes White Claw.
God, you would like White Claw. You look like a person that would like White Claw.
Well, the thing is, like, one of my favorite drinks is gin and tonic, and it reminds me of gin and tonic.
Yeah, it tastes like, oh God, like grapefruit juice that, like, your roommate left out and you accidentally drank.
Dude, maybe I should have taken that one.
Like there's some skin on top, like there's skin on top, and it's just straight that nasty water that like sets on the bottom. Oh.
I think everyone can tell we are probably not endorsed by Budweiser.
No. Shame on you, Budweiser. Shame on you for putting this out. I'm gonna have to drink some real alcohol after this. Okay, so today's episode, guys, we're talking about
one of the most important abductions that you guys have probably not actually heard about, unless you have.
Absolutely. We're gonna be talking about the Travis Walton UFO abduction story. And if you guys are like not very familiar with like UFO like abduction stories, the Travis Walton story is like it's one of the go-to abduction stories.
It's one of the least talked about iconic abductions.
Yeah. It's like there's the Hill story, and then there's the Travis Walton story. Like it's another just good one for you guys to know. And I thought this would be a good one to bring to you guys today to kind of talk about.
And it's also fairly complex. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of angles to this one.
It is, and there's a lot to digest in this episode. So the kind of giving you guys a little bit of background on this. So it's November 5th. 1975. Travis Walton works for the he works as a logger, okay? And him and his his logging buddies are working in the Apache. Oh, I can never pronounce these names right. The Apache-Sitgreaves National Forest, near Snowflake, Alaska. And him and his logging buddies are done.
Wait, did you say Alaska?
No, Arizona.
Yeah, you said Alaska.
Did I say Alaska? I'm sorry, I meant
Okay,
Snowflake.
not Alaska.
No, Snowflake, Arizona, which is kind of ironic, by the way. And they get done logging for the day, and they start heading home. They start leaving the site job, and as they're traveling together in this car home, like back towards town, all of a sudden in the distance they see this bright light in the tree line. Now, most loggers are aware that sometimes that forest fires are a thing, and according to Travis Walton, he said it's normal for loggers to stop, try to put out some sort of small fire so that, a wildfire doesn't start spreading. Wildfires are bad for the logging industry. So, they all stop and they get out of the car, and Travis Walton is ahead of the group, and he gets through the tree line, and he sees about 100 yards in front of him a saucer-shaped UFO. And he describes it as about being, I think, like the typical like UFO-esque shape that you're thinking of, with like the round, the dome on top with the round base on the bottom, and it's metallic and it's emanating this bright glow. And he said it was like 40 feet. And one thing he says is like 40 feet wide. Like, it's not really that big as far as UFOs go. And they're all freaked out by this, and his friends start backing away. Like, his coworkers start like backing away, and as Travis is like ducked down trying to get a better look at what's going on. All of a sudden he is hit by this bright white light that hits him and knocks him unconscious. And according to him, he said all of his friends did the responsible thing and left him. and they took off. This is kind of like why when me and Vic talk about what you're paranormal investigating, always make sure that you're going to go with the people that are going to run in the same direction as you. Yep. So you are not getting left to be abducted by aliens. So Travis is unconscious, and when he wakes up, he says he wakes up on a metal table, and the entire room. And with the interviews that I watched about him, he describes that he wakes up in this room that's all made of, I think he says, the same material.
Yeah, like the floor and ceiling kind of merge into one. It's like everything's one big piece, except for the tools that they need to move around.
Yeah, and he's on this like medical examination table, and there are some aliens that are in the room, and he describes them being kind of shorter, kind of like grays. It was kind of like, what was it, like pinkish, grayish skin with big eyes.
He described them as being a little more like colored than a gray is. Like they had more of a blush to their skin.
Like they throw the gray term out, but like it's not like straight gray, solid black eyes, which is what most people think of when they think gray. Like like when he's describing these guys, I'm almost thinking like kind of like the guy from The Mandalorian that said like this is the way, like I think they're called Unats or something like that. That are from that series, but with like giant black eyes, and of course he's rightfully freaked out by seeing this, and he ends up grabbing an instrument on the table to try to essentially defend himself from getting this weird medically examined by these aliens, and they take off from the room, and as he gets up, he moves towards the door where they run out of, and then when they run one direction, he runs another direction. Now, as he's heading in another direction, he gets this sense that he's on a much bigger ship than what he's on. Like, he describes, he thinks that the ship that abducted him took him to, like, another ship or, like, another area. And as he's trying to escape the horror of being abducted, he runs into another alien. But it's different than the ones that we described before. These are taller, more human-esque, with kind of, like, blondish platinum hair. Think Nordic, for those of you guys that know that term. Is kind of a term that's thrown out for the possible alien that he may have encountered. But they're wearing like a helmet, and he describes them as wearing like blue coveralls. And he says that he gets this sense that the alien is trying to assist him and help him at first, and he follows this alien. But he ends up following them to another room where there's more of them. And then things start getting a little more tense in the situation. And he starts to panic. And he says that they surround him and they place what he thought was a kind of a respirator, but without a hose. So it's just like the respirator piece over his mouth, which makes him go unconscious. And they sedate him. The next thing he knows is he's waking up from this fog, walking down the highway of Snowflake, Alaska. I said again, Snowflake, Arizona. And he comes to and realizes that he's off the ship, and he turns around and he sees the ship leaving behind him. He ends up walking down the highway and ends up getting to a gas station, an Exxon gas station. And he calls his brother-in-law, who calls his brother, and they come and get him. Turns out he had been missing for over 5 days. People thought he was dead. There were cops everywhere searching for him. He said there was a massive manhunt looking for him. They started contacting his coworkers, thinking that they had murdered him, and interrogating them about his disappearance. And then he tells everybody about his experience, and of course, in typical most abductee style, nobody believes him at first. They think he was drunk. They think he was on drugs. They think he went crazy. They think he hallucinated. He ends up getting drug tested shortly thereafter, which comes back clean. He ends up taking lie detector tests after this, passing initially on those lie detector tests. And from then on, he just he never changes this story about what happened to him.
If you guys have ever seen the movie Fire in the Sky, it's based off his encounter, although they changed the story a great deal. And Travis does not care for the fact that they have fudged so many of the details on it.
Oh, Fire in the Sky, brought to us by Robert Lieberman, who brought us such great works as D3, like the third Mighty Ducks movie, or the direct-to-DVD Stranger with Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, I know, like, when he initially was brought the script for the movie and Travis's story, he really felt that this wasn't interesting enough to make a story out of, so he ended up embellishing a great deal of details.
Yeah, like, the movie itself, if you guys have never seen it, it's been years. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. I know that a lot of... It's one of those movies and that's based off his story that it got more fame later, I think, when people go back and they kind of watch it. Like, some people that they watch it and they like it and they think it's great, but, you know, he says that there's the details that are changed in there, such as, like, the amount of, like, scrutiny he got from the, like, ufologists and even the number of guys that were witnesses to this thing. He says there was even more witnesses.
And the abduction was made way more invasive and aggressive than his actual abduction was.
Right. So, so where do you want to start first with talking about the story? Because that's the story essentially.
I want to talk a little bit more about what was happening during those 5 days when Travis was missing. Like, one of the first things, like you alluded to earlier, they really thought that, we say friends, we say buddies, but these were really, as Travis says, these were really just co-workers.
Yeah.
They weren't really a tight-knit group. They kind of came in, worked together, and then more or less just went their separate ways. And one of them actually hated Travis. Yeah. This is the only one of them that failed the lie detector test when they were... What happened? He didn't so much fail, but what happened was during one of the questions, it's asked, "Do you ever have or harbor ill will towards Travis?" And this guy really did. He tried to cut down a tree on Travis before to harm him. They were fighting over the same woman and things like that, and he just abandoned the test, and that's why it was inconclusive on him.
His name was Alan Davis. He didn't like where the line of questioning was going, and he's left. I think he later comes back to take the polygraph test. Yeah, and he ends up passing it.
And the police chief just really didn't buy his story. Supposedly, secretively, he did believe Travis because he had his own UFO encounter, but at least at the time, he was not outwardly portraying that fact.
Yeah. I think an underlying part of the story is there's more people in this story are into UFOs and have experiences than it's told publicly. You know, like Travis is saying, the sheriff of the town has had instances of this where he's seen UFOs. Travis himself had been very into the UFO phenomenon prior to his experience in this thing. So It's very weird how hard everybody came down on Travis when he showed back up. I mean, it's not surprising though. I mean, if somebody disappeared for 5 days, I guess, and said that they were abducted by aliens, you probably want to know what they might have been smoking or drinking.
Oh, yeah, and they were interrogating Travis's mother, trying to get information out of her because they thought that she might have been hiding Travis. Mm-hmm. And several times they had her broken down to tears during these interrogations.
Well, again, when it comes to disappearances or murders, 9 times out of 10, it's somebody else that you're living with or a direct person that's directly close to it. So that's probably why his family members and his coworkers were being so heavily scrutinized. It's usually not that big of a stretch to, randomly they're just random murders or random kidnappings. Usually it's done by somebody that directly knows the person. So it's not surprising he's gone for 5 days and then the police grill all of his close family members and coworkers as much as they did.
And at the same time, the guys that did come back, they didn't keep secret about what they saw. They came back and said they saw this UFO, that it hit him with this flash of light, and that they basically took off.
And something in Travis's defense is all of these witnesses, all these people that he was with, his coworkers, saw the UFO. Okay? And whenever all the investigators came, most of them backed up what Travis saw that time. And they, people had offered them money, he said, to come publicly to say, to refute what he said, that it was something else. But all of these guys claim that they saw a UFO. So none of them would speak ill against him in public.
Another thing is Travis's story has stayed extremely consistent over the years. Mm-hmm. There's only been a slight little bit of flubbing here and there, and they're only on minor details on how interested he was in UFOs. Apparently at one point they're claiming he said he was more interested than he actually was, or vice versa. But for the most part, he stayed very consistent, especially on the details that are important.
When you watch interviews of Travis, and the one, if you guys are searching for recommendations on this, Hannibal TV did a fantastic interview with him. It's over an hour and 20 minutes long. They go over his story from start to finish. They nitpick the whole thing. It's a really, really good interview with him. It's probably the best one that I've seen so far, where it's mostly just Travis talking rather than other people commenting on his actual experience. So it's a great place to start. When I watched Travis talk about his experiences with it, getting abducted by aliens is a very traumatic thing. You're going through a very traumatic experience. So when you watch him talk about what he saw, it reminds me a lot of vets, when they're thinking back to a traumatic event in wartime, or people that have experienced a significant trauma.
Yeah, sometimes at work we work with people with PTSD, and it's something that we're fairly familiar with, and he had that same sort of look, facial expression, and avoidant eye contact that really made me wonder, does he have some PTSD left over from this experience?
Travis Walton is a guy that people compare to Bob Lazar, in their trustworthiness. But if you watch interviews with Bob Lazar is almost kind of even made for TV, because he's directly looking at the camera the whole time he's talking. He never flutters. He never moves. Watching Travis Walton is like watching your grandpa tell a story about World War II.
Well, when you're talking about Bob Lazar, he had an amazing set of experiences, but they weren't a traumatic set. None of it was so much invasive on him.
Yeah, but he thought for the longest time the government was coming to kill him. Now again, this isn't a video necessarily about whether or not Bob Lazar is accurate. You guys can totally go check out our video where we talk about Bob Lazar. But I'm talking about Travis Walton. So watching him as a character, as this character when he's talking. I mean, me and Vic, again, we work with people that have gone through traumatic events. We also deal with a lot of people that lie to us on a daily basis about as poor historians. And just watching him, that's what he looks like. He looks like a old person telling a traumatic event. He's reflecting back on what he went through. He's not doing kind of a showmanship, song and dance. Even though, full for the record, he did get money from the National Enquirer shortly after coming forward with the story.
Yeah, and he did make money off the movies and stuff too.
He did.
And
he wrote a book.
Books.
Yeah, he wrote a book called I think it's called The Walton Experience.
That's his first book.
Yes, yeah. Published his first book in 1978 called The Walton Experience, and I think he publishes another book called I think it's called Fire in the Sky. Yeah,
it's because around that time they were experiencing issues with lightning bolts catching on fire the tops of the trees.
Right.
And he took that name from that because when they first saw the UFO, they initially thought it was that because they saw this light, but it was up off the ground, and they thought lightning bolts had ignited the tops of the trees. But then they realized it was moving, and that's when they're like, okay, there might be something going on here.
What's the next thing we want to talk about?
Okay. Let's talk about his abduction. Let's start breaking into this nut. I think we're ready.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, Travis's view of his experiences is that what happened was he had gotten too close to UFO, that the flash of light had something to do with the propulsion, that it had injured him severely badly, and that then they had picked him up to basically heal him because they had accidentally injured him.
Oh, those are the most benevolent aliens I've ever heard of.
I don't think Travis is lying, but I think he might be a little naive when it comes to some of this. All respect to you, Travis.
Oh,
You're a cool guy.
Yeah.
We're not saying that there's something flawed in you, but I do think that is unlikely to be the legitimate case.
Mm-hmm.
There is some signs that he was, based on what he was tactilely feeling like there was burning inside his body, based on the fact that there was augmented growth of the plants in the area. I think whatever hit him exposed him to a great deal of radiation. But I would be surprised if these extraterrestrials' reason for picking him up was nearly that benevolent.
I'm gonna go the other way. I think like he was legit hit by a phaser set to stun. Like, I think he was, like, legit probably picked up. Like, I think that's what they were doing. I mean, he wakes up in a medical facility with tools next to him, and there's aliens that have surrounded him. You know, I don't see why there's any more of a reason to believe that they did it on purpose than that it was some sort of accident and they were trying to assist him.
Yeah, because when you look at other UFO stories, you don't really hear about the light being associated with an act of propulsion when it comes to these UFOs.
Right.
It seems to be more of a weapon/gathering device. I've never really heard of it used as a something that's used for propulsion. Have you?
Mm-mm.
And we've looked over many UFO cases. And I would say you're probably right. It was probably something done intentional. Now, why these things were like hovering in that area, I'm not quite sure.
Now,
but I think they're like, oh, there's one watching us. Bam.
Now, what does surprise me is that he wakes up on the table. You know, they had the ability to stun him, or they had the ability to do that, and then he just wakes up on the table. I would think that a species with the ability to traverse the vastness of space would have the ability to control somebody like that on their ship.
Well, think about what happens right after that. It's something that you hear a lot in gray and reptilian encounters.
Mm-hmm.
So he wakes up on the ship, and initially they all kind of gather around him and start leaning over him, staring straight into his eyes. I think he was probably sedated using a psychic method and somehow broke through whatever it was. And I think when they're leaning over him, staring deep into his eyes, I think they're trying to put him back in that mesmeric state, put him back under psychic influence. And at that point, for one reason or another, he just wasn't having it. He wasn't slipping back under their influence. I think that there's just something about him that broke through that influence.
No, and I think we've seen that before. There are some people that are an exception to how people normally work. Like, their just brain is just wired in a different way. So it's very quite possible that maybe they were doing something to put him out, and just for whatever reason, his brain chemistry or how his brain is wired made him more resistant than maybe what they expected. You know, then that's whenever he's like, he wakes up, grabs the tool, and the aliens are like, time to roll.
Which I buy pretty well, because there's a lot of stories of people who are, when aliens are in their house beginning the process of taking them, and they're putting them under like a paralysis, trying to control their mind. And sometimes when they break through it, what do the aliens do?
they run.
They usually take off really quick because I'm pretty sure they're worried that they can be harmed in that situation. Yeah. And I think it makes sense that once he broke through, got up and started swinging an object, they're just going to nope out of it.
Like, if you look like a gray alien as compared to, like, the average human, like, without their mental powers, I feel like I could take one. Like, I feel
they're small, they're gaunt.
Yeah, I feel like I could punch one. I feel like I could punch one out. I really do. So I'm hoping that my brain chemistry is wired in a way that it doesn't work on me. I don't know, but...
And look how spindly their arms are. You would have to be able to break those relatively easily.
And their heads are so huge. It's like it's such an easy target, you know. Probably not even used to actually fist fighting, so they're probably even worse at fighting, like knowing, like, maybe I should dodge this projectile coming.
I mean, their body shape is extremely lithe. Yeah. I would believe that they would be good at sneaking around, which makes sense for, like, a lot of people who have, like, home invasion alien encounters where they're, like, creeping around and they're peeking through doorways, stuff, seeing what's going on. I believe that they could sneak. Now, I do not believe that in a standard fight without some sort of psychic influence or technological influence, whichever it may be, I do not believe that they would stand up to your standard Homo sapien. I think that they would get wrecked.
It would look like the scene from Mars Attacks where the boxer fights the Martian and he just punches the helmet off. Like, you know, it took like 50 of them to subdue him.
What's your thoughts on his next encounter?
Now, that's what I was going to go to next. So the next thing that he does is he encounters these Nordic-esque aliens. And
he wasn't really sure if these were human or non-human. Yeah. He leaned towards this was probably a human.
Well, that's pretty common in Nordic experiences where people describe them as looking human-ish. You know, there's something slightly off, whether it's the eyes, the fact that they look like elves from Lord of the Rings, like from a Tolkien book. Esque thing, you know, kind of, you know, look to him. I have not encountered a lot of stories involving Greys and Nordics together. I know there's some, but I mean, I found it weird that there were two different alien species on that small of a on that kind of a ship.
I've heard a theory before that what's going on is that the Greys are basically a servitor species for the Nordics, and there's like the tall Greys and the short Greys, and they're basically like bio-robots. Now, I've never found anything to back up this theory. This is just something I've heard floating around before, and I don't particularly buy it as being necessarily the situation, but in this specific instance, it does kind of make sense.
You know, now, in when you listen to Travis' story, he felt like he was being led to, for a good reason, to a particular area, you know, and then once he got there, they're trying to help him. That's when they sedated him. I believe that because Vic and me have done similar tactics to patients at work. We were trying to be as least restrictive as possible. You're like, come here, it's gonna be okay. You know, trying to do whatever you can. But look, you're agitated. You're a danger to self or others. You're running around on a ship wielding a dangerous object. We can't have you doing that.
Yeah, and he felt that the helmet thing that the person was wearing was for its protection from him since he had gotten out of control, but he felt that this was an entity sent in to calm him down. I'm going with psychic influence here. How do you go from fighting off a bunch of aliens with some sort of weird object to, oh, hey, this guy's going to be the person to help me?
Like, he got Stockholm Syndrome real quick. Real quick, real fast.
I really think that there is some sort of psychic or technological influence over him at this point to make him believe that. And then that allowed them to, like, you know, sedate him.
Like, again, I think that Travis is his mindset here. He wakes up in a totally alien space, literally believing he has been abducted by aliens. He grabs a weapon. He is running. The only thing on his mind is escape. He runs into somebody who is kind of still not human, looking weird. That doesn't ever actually talk to him, just gestures towards him, and then becomes somewhat trusting of this particular entity. Like, again, I go back to our experience working at the in mental health. We've done that. People that are trying to escape or elope, that they don't shift that quick. Like when they're in that panic escape mode.
Think about it on a purely biological level. He wakes up in this situation with these things staring at him. He's shocked. He realizes he can move. He moves to aggression. They flee. He takes his chance to find a way out. his heart should be pumping really hard, and he should be brimming with adrenaline at this point. That is not a conducive state to suddenly shift to people are on my side. Like, his psychology at this point should be extremely guarded, but he doesn't seem to be. And that's odd to me. That's a anomaly right there. And that makes me think there's a unseen force in action now. And I really think probably some sort of psychic influence where they're like, okay, we need to calm this guy down so we can get this mask on him, so we can get him sedated, or he's going to end up wrecking the ship or something. And I really think that that's what happens. He gets into that room. He runs into this Nordic who is probably coming to put him under the psychic influence anyways. He makes him calm enough that the rest can approach. They sedate him, and they have him back under control.
And then all of a sudden years later, he's like, I was kind of out of line when I was, running through if you listen to him, he's like, I was kind of out of line running through that ship with the dangerous object. Like, listening to him now, he still says that. He's like,
I feel like it's programming. I feel like this has to be programming, because that seems very rational to me.
It's so weird. Like, even people that have been in just total psychosis with this, that have just been like later, like, it's not. They're like, I'm sorry, I was totally out of line. I appreciate that you guys all tackled me and sedated me and like that. Like, it's so rare to get that.
Okay. Another question I have about this situation he finds himself in. And I have not heard him bring this up himself in any interviews, but you were gone for 5 days. You have memory of what probably comes down to a less than 30-minute encounter. What the heck was going on for the rest of it? Because we don't know if, like, the part he experienced, if that's towards the beginning, towards the middle, towards the end. We don't really know where that falls in the chronological order.
I'm not really surprised that he is not as disturbed about that time loss. We run into that with mental health a lot of time, where people have time lapses because of not being able to remember what was going on. So it's not surprising that he's not super concerned. Now, I think he should be probably concerned about what they did to him in those days, but, I'm not surprised he's not.
I've experienced one case of missing time, and it bugs the hell out of me to this day. I don't know what happened during that time. All I can say is something went wrong somewhere. But, like, I know that gnaws at me sometimes, because I don't know what occurred during that time. And I feel like this should be something that's gnawing at him.
Like, I think if you're trying to process that kind of trauma, you're probably not he probably doesn't want to know. Like, if I had to really think about it, like, I think for a lot of people, some people just, I don't think they'd want to know. Because I think once you've moved past that in your life, like, it's been like, what, 30-something, it's been 40, some years since then. Like, he's probably wanting to move on, so he's probably not that concerned about that time loss for him.
It also could be a survival mechanism.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's having to move. You can't change the past. Mm-hmm. You can only change the now to make a better tomorrow. So
maybe not thinking about it is something that helps him then.
But no, I think he was experimented upon. I really do.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's tons of abduction stories where people where humanity's been experimented upon for biological, for anatomy, reproduction, even fun. I mean, I've heard all these accounts.
Even with our level of technology, there's a lot of serious injuries that it will not take us 5 days to rectify. We can get people who've had major heart attacks back out on the street before 5 days, even major physical trauma.
Do you know what's weird though is again, he himself says that when he wakes up, he feels he was on a larger ship. Mm-hmm. Okay. But when he wakes up again from his haze, he's back home. Like, they brought him back home. So obviously they put him on a smaller ship and returned him back. It's weird that they cared enough to return him back to the same place.
Well, like, it almost makes a similar place.
Well, a similar-esque place where they were able to go. Like,
and he does say that, like, in his haze, he thought he saw a light moving away from him, but it was like he was halfway away, kind of coming out of whatever sedation he was under.
I know when we talk on this podcast about aliens, we talk about them as not being the most benevolent things. But it's weird, though, that many times in abduction stories, they'll still return them back to their original place. You'd think if they were that malevolent, they just wouldn't care.
No, I think it's an aspect of the study. I think they did what they wanted to and then dropped him off.
Wouldn't that mean that you were watching him again probably later?
They probably are.
Yeah,
I don't think that this was like one and done sort of case. Many abductees report being abducted multiple times, and some of them do not naturally remember. That memory needs a degree of coaxing. Mm-hmm. Maybe he has been taken more times. I don't know for a fact he hasn't or has. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they did the experiment and they never had a reason to return, but they thought that perhaps in the future they may.
Yeah. Because again, like, you would think if they were that, like, again, they would just not care if he, like, died. The fact that he lives has got to be intentional.
Well, you don't hear too much about stories involving, them actually killing people.
Well, yeah, because again, they would just be missing persons. I guess. Yeah.
I guess that's true. But
also fun fact this occurs in a national forest, which is again very closely probably tied into missing 411, and a lot of people believing that people are being abducted from national forests.
And often they're brought back in not the quite right place.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it, many of them are like where the person's found like 5 days later when the person is found.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a weird coincidence, don't you think?
Yeah, I really wish I would have realized this coincidence before now, and I would have done some more digging into that. Mm-hmm. But that's just kind of just now hit me.
Oh, God, I don't know why so much. It bothers me that aliens return people back generally close to where they abducted them before. Like,
I don't think there's a motive to it. I think it's because there's a degree of study here.
Like, yeah, it's so unnerving that people do that they do that. Like it would almost make me feel calmer if they just didn't care to just drop somebody back wherever.
Well, think about it like this. A lot of the stuff that we get back from people who have been abducted seems to imply some sort of aspect of a breeding program. They've taken what they needed to from his DNA. They're going to play with it, see what results they can get. And you know what? They might need more later.
It's also just weird that they may have just like pinged him up and then like looked at the below and went, "Nope, that's a dude. Keep moving."
Maybe, I don't know.
They just blew on it.
Hey, something that we didn't think about is maybe what he saw wasn't a Nordic, maybe it was a hybrid.
Maybe.
Because a lot of people who do get abducted do report seeing like degrees of these hybrids. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think he's telling the truth? Can you think of any angle here where this was cover for something? There's a lot of people who imply that he has made this up. Like, do you want me to go first?
No, I mean, if he's making it up, I would think that the reason he has made it up is for financial gain. I've heard the theory that him and his coworkers made this story up to get his company out of a logging contract that they didn't want to be in, because obviously this place is dangerous, there's too much going on, we can't go back to this place. I've heard that theory. He does make money off of this. There's a movie deal that comes from it. He's written like 2 books. At the same time, he might just try and be making the best of a bad situation. But no, when I watch his interview, Travis is a believable person. I do. I think he's a believable person. When I listen to him talk, this is a guy who is reflecting back on events and just he's a person that is reflecting on some major past events when he talks. So I think I believe him.
I think, okay, if this is a staged situation, my only thought is he must not be very smart. Because if he set this up to cover up for him going to do something secretive or something else criminal, got abducted by UFOs is a really, really bad way of covering it. Yeah, especially true. With being missing that long. Because that means they're going to go out and search for him. If he's off doing something criminal or something along those lines, just taking off 5 days or saying you're sick or going on vacation, all those are infinitely better covers because none of them involve a search party looking for you. If he's doing it for profit, I did not get the sense that he is living a very wealthy, high-dollar life. I am getting the sense that like he still has to work. He has not profited to a degree where he is living like he didn't seem like he's living uncomfortably, but he didn't seem like he's in a situation where he lives an opulent life.
And again, I'm not inclined to believe just some random 30-year-old logger decides, I'm gonna make up being abducted by aliens for financial gain. Like, I don't think people think that way. I really don't.
And pretty much everyone involved in the case came to the conclusion of these people either believe their experiences are real or they are all amazing liars. And just given that I cannot come with a logical motive for making this up unless they just executed it very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just dumbfounded to try to come up with a reason. What a lot of people say is, oh, people made it up for attention. It would be hard to get that many people to sign on and commit to it and not break under scrutiny of law for something that's just attention seeking. I think that he had, at bare minimum, I think he believes the experiences that he had. Truthfully, I think that the experiences he had are fairly within reason of human memory, accurate to his experience. I think that this is a true story.
Like, timing wise, I get it that this is coming out shortly after the Barney and Betty Hill UFO abduction story. So shortly after that, there are this string of like UFO stories that go out. But truthfully, Travis is it's just the most believable. I mean, it really is. He's just this really believable guy. I just don't see him being the kind of guy that just wants to make this up for no reason.
And a lot of people scrutinize the whole thing where a lot of his memories of the abduction, a lot of the details come out under hypnotic regression. But the thing is, that wasn't true of all the details. He knew the story generally of what happened, but he was able to recall more details under the hypnotic suggestion. So some people say, oh, he was just hypnotized and the imagination made it all up. But that doesn't explain all the other loggers who also saw the UFO blast him.
Name one logger that said he's lying. Oh, wait. I mean that's my point. I mean, it's just, that's a part of the detail that's hard for me to believe this is entirely just a hoax.
Yeah, the whole group has stuck to their story pretty well.
Now, some people will say that, shortly after the Betty and Barney Hill incident, the UFO incident, there was a string of other, UFO sightings, and that's why they're hoaxes. But maybe the Betty and Barney Hill incident was just the beginning. Maybe if this is the beginning of something, that's why there's more stories, because there's more going on, because that's when these abductions are taking off. Just because one person hears about it and everybody else starts doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. It could be one person had it happen to them, and then more went from and then more happened afterwards. But we're going to leave that for you guys to talk about in the comments below. Definitely put below in the comments what you guys think about Travis, what you guys think about the story, anything like that. We're definitely wanting to get your guys' input on this. That leaves us, we're going to be getting into our topic for today. So if you guys are interested in catching the rest of this podcast, make sure you guys go over to our Patreon and sign up to become a patron.
Yeah, in our Pillow Talk segment for our patrons, we're going to be talking about a plan that would get us in trouble with our wives if they were aware of it.
Yes, we're going to be talking about going on an adventure this Thursday in our Pillow Talk section where we explore the Randonautica app. But until next time, guys, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening. Just so you guys know, I have not heard about this app before today.
Yep. I stumbled upon this app while I was down in Nashville competing for comedy. I was down there in my hotel room, and I'm, surfing the web trying to find different topics for maybe me and Vic to talk about. And I stumbled upon, on Reddit, this thing called Randonautica. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this. This is a new app that's been out since the summer. I think it's in its beta phase right now. The Randonautica app is an app that you can download to your smartphone that essentially